Her name was Sophia Chen, and she had always been the kind of woman who knew exactly what she wanted. At 23, fresh out of college with a business degree and dreams bigger than the small town she grew up in, she believed life was about making smart choices, strategic choices, choices that would lead to success, stability, and the kind of life she saw in magazines. When she met Andrew Kim, she thought he might be a temporary detour on her carefully planned route to success. He was a graduate student working on his MBA while juggling 2 part-time jobs to pay his tuition. They met at a coffee shop where he worked the morning shift, and she had been charmed by his warm smile and the way he remembered her order after just 2 visits. Their first date was at a small Thai restaurant where they split the bill because Andrew insisted on honesty. "I can't pretend to have money I don't have," he had said, his eyes earnest. "But I can promise you the best conversation you've ever had." And he had delivered on that promise. They talked for 4 hours about everything and nothing, about their dreams and fears, about the books they loved and the places they wanted to see. For a while, Sophia let herself believe that maybe love could be enough. Andrew was kind and ambitious in his own way. He worked relentlessly, attending classes during the day and working nights and weekends. He talked about his plans to start his own consulting firm someday, about helping small businesses grow, about making a real difference. His eyes lit up when he talked about the future, and Sophia found herself caught up in his enthusiasm. They dated for 2 years, and they were good years in many ways. Andrew took her on dates that were creative rather than expensive. Picnics in the park with food he cooked himself, free concerts and art gallery openings, long walks through the city where they would make up stories about the people they passed. He wrote her letters, actual handwritten letters, telling her all the things he loved about her. He remembered every important date, every casual mention of something she liked. One particular memory stayed with Sophia for years afterward. It was her 24th birthday, and Andrew had been working double shifts to save money for something special. He took her to the botanical gardens, where admission was free on Thursday evenings. He had packed a picnic basket with all her favorite foods, items he had carefully collected over weeks. There was imported cheese he had saved up for, fresh strawberries from the farmer's market, homemade chocolate cake that he had baked himself after watching tutorials online. They sat under a magnolia tree as the sun set, and Andrew gave her a small box wrapped in paper he had decorated himself. Inside was a necklace. Nothing expensive, just a simple silver chain with a small pendant in the shape of a compass. "I know it's not much," he had said, looking almost embarrassed, "but I wanted to give you something that meant something. You've always known where you want to go, Sophia. You've always had direction. This compass, it's to remind you that no matter where you go, you have the ability to find your way." She had loved it, had worn it every day for months. But as time passed and her dissatisfaction grew, the necklace spent more time in her jewelry box than around her neck. She told herself it was because the chain was cheap and kept tangling. The truth was that it reminded her of a version of herself she was trying to leave behind. But Sophia was working at a prestigious marketing firm downtown, and every day she was surrounded by wealth and success. Her colleagues drove nice cars and wore designer clothes. They talked about their vacation homes and their investment portfolios. The partners at the firm lived in penthouses and flew first class. And slowly, imperceptibly, Sophia began to feel the gap between the life she was living with Andrew and the life she could have. Her friend Jessica became a particular source of comparison and envy. Jessica had married a hedge fund manager right out of college, and her life seemed like something from a magazine. She posted pictures from the Amalfi Coast, from private yacht parties, from charity galas where tickets cost $5,000 a plate. When Jessica invited Sophia to lunch, she would arrive in a chauffeur-driven car and talk casually about the renovations to their summer house in the Hamptons. "Don't you ever want more?" Jessica asked one afternoon over sushi that cost more than Andrew's weekly grocery budget. "I mean, I'm sure Andrew is nice and all, but nice doesn't pay for the life you deserve. You're smart and beautiful and ambitious. You could have anyone. Why settle for someone who's still figuring things out?" The words planted seeds that grew in the fertile soil of Sophia's existing doubts. Why was she settling? What was she waiting for? Andrew had potential, sure, but potential didn't buy the designer handbags her colleagues carried. Potential didn't get her invited to the exclusive parties where real networking happened. Potential was just another word for not there yet. Andrew was still in school, still working multiple jobs, still years away from starting that consulting firm he dreamed about. They lived in his tiny studio apartment because it was all he could afford. The place was clean and neat, but it was undeniably small. The bathroom was barely big enough to turn around in. The kitchen was just a hot plate and a mini fridge. They had to be creative about storage, using underbed boxes and wall-mounted shelves. When they went out with her work friends, Sophia found herself making excuses for Andrew's cheap clothes and older car. She found herself embarrassed, and that embarrassment made her feel guilty, which made her resent him for making her feel guilty. It was an ugly cycle, and she knew it, but she couldn't seem to stop it. Andrew noticed the change in her. How could he not? He tried to talk to her about it one evening as they were making dinner together in his cramped kitchen. "You've been distant lately," he said, chopping vegetables for the stir-fry they were making. "Is everything okay? Is it work?" "Work is fine," she said, not meeting his eyes. "I'm just tired." "Is it us?" he asked quietly. "Are you unhappy with us?" She wanted to lie, wanted to spare his feelings, but the truth came tumbling out. "I don't know, Andrew. Sometimes I just wonder if this is all there is. If we're always going to be counting pennies and living in a shoebox apartment." He set down the knife and turned to face her. "This isn't permanent, Sophia. I'm almost done with my MBA. I'm already getting job offers. Things are going to get better." "When?" she asked, and heard the sharpness in her own voice. "When will things get better? Next year? In 5 years? In 10? I'm watching all my friends build lives, buy houses, travel the world, and we're eating stir-fry in a studio apartment for the 3rd time this week." He looked hurt, and she felt guilty, but the words were out. "I'm working as hard as I can," he said. "I'm doing everything I know how to do. What more can I give you?" She didn't have an answer to that. Or rather, she did, but she didn't want to say it out loud. She wanted him to already be successful, to already have money, to be able to give her the life she wanted right now, not someday. The turning point came at her company's annual gala. It was a black tie event at a luxury hotel, the kind of event where everyone tried to outdo each other with their expensive outfits and impressive dates. Sophia had been looking forward to it for months, had bought a dress she couldn't quite afford, had imagined making an impression on the senior partners. Andrew had rented a suit, and he looked handsome in it, but Sophia couldn't help noticing it didn't fit quite right, that his shoes were old and scuffed, that he seemed uncomfortable in the world of wealth and excess. He tried his best, making conversation with her colleagues, but she could see them dismissing him, categorizing him as beneath their notice. One of her colleagues, a woman named Patricia who wore a different designer dress to every office event, literally looked Andrew up and down and then turned away without speaking to him. Another colleague asked Andrew what he did, And when he said he was still in graduate school, the man's interest visibly waned. "So you're a student," he said, in a tone that made it sound like an embarrassing disease. How nice. Sophia watched Andrew handle the subtle and not-so-subtle slights with grace, keeping his composure even as people dismissed him. But she felt humiliated by association. This was her boyfriend, and people were judging her for being with him. Every pitying glance from a colleague, every raised eyebrow when she introduced Andrew, felt like a confirmation that she was making a mistake. At one point in the evening, one of the senior partners, James Morrison, approached her. James was 42, divorced, and successful in the way that made people take notice. He was charming and confident, and he had been showing interest in Sophia for months. "Your boyfriend seems nice," James said, watching Andrew across the room. "But does he really understand your ambitions, your potential? You're going places, Sophia. You need someone who's already there, not someone you have to wait for. Someone who can open doors for you, not someone you have to push through doors." His words planted a seed that grew quickly in the fertile soil of her doubts. She started to look at Andrew differently, measuring him against the successful men at her firm, finding him lacking. It wasn't that Andrew wasn't good. He was good, maybe too good. But good wasn't enough when she wanted great. Kind wasn't enough when she wanted powerful. Potential wasn't enough when she wanted proven success. The tension between them grew over the following months. She started picking fights over small things. Why couldn't he afford a better apartment? Why was he still in school at 25? Why did he always have to count every dollar? Why couldn't he take her somewhere nice for once? The fights became more frequent, and Andrew, patient Andrew, kept trying to understand, kept trying to reassure her. One night, after a particularly bitter argument about money, Andrew sat her down and took her hands in his. "Sophia, I love you," he said, his voice earnest. "I know this is hard. I know you want more. But I'm working towards something real, something meaningful. I want to build a company that helps people, that makes a difference. I want to do it the right way, with integrity. That takes time. Just give me time, Sophia. I promise I'll build something we can both be proud of. I promise I'll give you the life you deserve." "But what if your timing doesn't match mine?" she asked. "What if I don't want to wait?" He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw fear in his eyes. "Then I guess you have to decide what matters more to you, the journey or the destination, building something together or arriving somewhere alone." She didn't answer. She didn't know how to. But Sophia was tired of waiting, tired of cheap dates and shared bills, tired of making excuses to her colleagues, tired of feeling like she was settling for less than she deserved. James Morrison made his move 3 months after the gala. He asked her to dinner at the most expensive restaurant in the city, the kind of place where the menu didn't list prices. He picked her up in his Mercedes, took her to a place where the sommelier knew him by name, ordered wine that cost more than Andrew's monthly rent. The restaurant was everything she had imagined luxury would be. The lighting was perfect, the service impeccable, the food exquisite. Other diners were clearly wealthy, dressed in clothes that cost thousands, discussing business deals and vacation plans. This was the world Sophia wanted to be part of, and James was offering her a key. Over dessert, James leaned forward. "You're wasting your time with that student," he said. "You're a woman who knows what she wants. I'm a man who can give it to you. We make sense together, Sophia. We're the same kind of people, ambitious, driven, unwilling to settle." "What about your wife?" Sophia asked. because she knew James was married, even if he didn't wear a ring. "We're separated," he said smoothly. "Have been for months. The divorce will be final soon." She never understood what it takes to be successful, never supported my ambitions. She wanted me to work less, earn less, be less. I need someone who understands that success requires sacrifice. Sophia should have heard the warning in those words, should have recognized the red flags, but she was dazzled by the wine and the attention and the promise of the life she had always wanted. She went home that night knowing she had a choice to make. She could stay with Andrew, wait for his potential to become reality, live modestly while he built his dreams, or she could choose James, choose the life of luxury and status she had always wanted, choose to be with someone who was already successful rather than someone who might be someday. She chose James, or rather, she chose what James represented: security, status, the immediate gratification of a life well lived. Breaking up with Andrew was harder than she expected. She went to his apartment on a Sunday afternoon, had rehearsed what she would say, but when she saw his face light up at the sight of her, the words stuck in her throat. He had been studying, his textbooks spread across his small table, and he immediately closed them to give her his full attention. "I made coffee," he said, smiling, "your favorite, and I picked up those muffins you like from the bakery on 4th Street. The small gesture, the thoughtfulness of it, made what she was about to do even harder. "We need to talk," she finally said, and watched his smile fade. They sat on his worn couch, and she told him the truth, or a version of it. She said she needed to focus on her career, that she wanted different things, that they were moving in different directions. She didn't tell him about James, didn't mention that she had already started something with someone else. Andrew listened quietly, his face pale, his hands clasped tightly together. When she finished, he asked only one question. "Is there someone else?" She could have lied. Part of her wanted to. But she had never been a liar, and she wasn't going to start now. "Yes," she said, "there is." He nodded slowly, as if confirming something he had suspected. "Is he rich?" he asked, not accusatory, just tired. "Yes." "Does he make you happy, or does his money make you feel successful?" The question hit harder than any accusation could have. Sophia felt anger flare up, defensive and hot. "That's not fair," she said. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under, the world I work in. I need someone who's already successful, not someone who might be successful someday. I need someone who can give me the life I want now, not in some hypothetical future." "So this is about what I can give you," Andrew said quietly, "not about who I am." "Isn't that what relationships are?" she shot back. "Aren't we supposed to meet each other's needs? You're asking me to wait indefinitely for you to become successful. That's not fair either." "I'm not asking you to wait indefinitely," Andrew said, his voice strained. "I'm asking you to believe in me, to be my partner while I build something meaningful. I thought that's what love was, supporting each other through the hard times so you can celebrate together during the good times." "But what if the hard times never end?" she said. "What if you never become successful? What if we spend our whole lives struggling?" "Then we would have spent our lives together," he said simply. "Building something, trying, being there for each other. Isn't that worth more than an easy life with someone you don't really love?" "Who says I don't love him?" she said, defensive. "Do you?" Andrew asked, looking directly at her. "Do you love him, or do you love what he represents?" She didn't answer because she didn't know. Or maybe because she did know and didn't want to admit it. Andrew stood up and walked to the window. He stood there for a long time, his back to her, his shoulders tense. Then he said, very quietly, "I loved you. I still love you. And I would have given you everything I built, everything I achieved. You wouldn't have just been along for the ride, Sophia. You would have been my partner, my equal. We would have built it together. But I understand. You want the destination without the journey. You want the reward without the work. You want to be with someone who's already arrived, rather than someone who's still climbing." He turned to face her, and there were tears in his eyes, but his voice was steady. "I hope he gives you what you're looking for. I hope you're happy, Sophia. I really do. Because someone should be happy from this. It might as well be you. I hope you get everything you think you want. And I hope it's everything you imagine it will be." She left his apartment feeling vindicated and guilty in equal measure. She told herself she had made the right choice, the smart choice. Andrew would understand eventually. He would move on. They both would. She was doing what was best for both of them, really. He would be free to focus on his studies and his dreams without having to worry about disappointing her. She took off the compass necklace he had given her for her birthday and put it in the back of her jewelry box. Looking at it made her feel guilty, and she didn't want to feel guilty about making a practical choice. Her relationship with James moved quickly. Within 3 months, she had moved into his luxury condo overlooking the water. The place was enormous compared to Andrew's studio, with floor-to-ceiling windows, a gourmet kitchen, a master bathroom bigger than Andrew's entire apartment. She had her own walk-in closet, her own space, her own life of luxury. She quit her job at the marketing firm, and James got her a position at his company, a pharmaceutical corporation, where she worked in public relations. The job was easy, the pay was excellent, and she finally had the life she had always wanted. James took her to expensive restaurants and luxury resorts. He bought her designer clothes and expensive jewelry. He introduced her to wealthy people who spoke casually about their second homes and their private jets. Sophia felt like she had finally arrived, like she was finally living the life she deserved. But there were problems she hadn't anticipated. James was a workaholic who was rarely home. When he was home, he was distracted, always on his phone, always dealing with some business crisis. The attention he had showered on her during their courtship faded once she moved in. She was no longer a conquest, but a fixture, something he had acquired and could now take for granted. Their first real fight came 3 months after she moved in. James had promised to take her to a charity gala, an event she had been looking forward to. She had bought a new dress, had made an appointment at the salon, had been excited to be seen on his arm at such an important event. But the day of the gala, James came home and announced he couldn't make it. "A client emergency," he said dismissively. "You understand. Business comes first." "But you promised," she said, trying to keep the disappointment out of her voice. "And now I'm unpromising," he said, already loosening his tie. "This is a $10 million account, Sophia. It takes priority over a party." "It's not just a party," she said. "It's important for your image, for networking." "Then you go," he said. "Represent us. That's what you're good at, isn't it? Looking pretty and making small talk?" The dismissive tone stung, but she swallowed her hurt. "Fine," she said. "I'll go alone." "Actually," he said, not looking at her, "I'd prefer if you didn't. People will ask where I am, and I don't want to deal with the questions later. Just stay home, watch a movie or something." She had stared at him, realizing that she wasn't his partner in the way she had been with Andrew. She was an accessory, useful when convenient, dismissed when not needed. He was also controlling in subtle ways that became more obvious as time passed. He didn't like it when she wanted to see her old friends, said they were beneath her now, that she needed to move in different circles. He chose her clothes for important events, dictated what she could eat at restaurants because he said he wanted her to maintain her figure. He was jealous and possessive, questioning her if she talked too long to another man at a party, accusing her of flirting when she was just being polite. "You need to be more careful about how you present yourself," he would say. "You're with me now. People are watching. Everything you do reflects on me." She found herself walking on eggshells, constantly monitoring her behavior, her words, her appearance. The freedom she had felt with Andrew, the ability to just be herself, was gone. With James, she was always performing, always trying to be the woman he wanted her to be. The first time he raised his voice at her, she was shocked. They had been at a charity gala, and she had laughed at something another businessman had said. The man had been funny, telling a story about a disastrous golf game, and Miranda had genuinely enjoyed the humor. But James had been watching, and in the car on the way home, he had been silent, his jaw clenched, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. When they got back to the apartment, he exploded. "Do you think I'm stupid?" he demanded. "Do you think I don't see the way you look at other men? Do you think I brought you into my life, gave you everything, just so you could embarrass me?" "I was just laughing at a joke," she protested. "There was nothing inappropriate about it." "You were flirting," he snapped, making eyes at him like some desperate woman. "You made me look like a fool, like I can't control my own girlfriend." The word control sent a chill through her. "I'm not something to be controlled," she said. "No." He stepped closer to her, and for a moment she felt afraid. "I took you out of that mediocre life. I gave you everything. The least you can do is show some respect and loyalty." He didn't hit her, not that time, but he threw a glass against the wall where it shattered. The sound was shocking in the quiet apartment, and Sophia flinched. Then, as quickly as the storm had come, it passed. He apologized, said he was stressed from work, that he loved her too much, that the thought of losing her made him crazy. He bought her a diamond bracelet the next day, heavy and expensive, and she told herself it was just a one-time thing, that everyone had bad days. But it wasn't a one-time thing. It happened again, and then again, each time over something smaller, something more insignificant. His temper became a constant threat, something she had to navigate carefully. She learned to watch what she said, how she acted, who she talked to. She learned to read his moods, to sense when a storm was coming, to make herself small and quiet when he was angry. The penthouse that had seemed like a dream became a gilded cage. She had everything she thought she wanted, except freedom, except peace, except happiness. She had money and status and designer clothes, but she felt more trapped than she ever had in Andrew's tiny studio. She thought about leaving, but where would she go? Back to Andrew? He had made it clear that door was closed. She had burned that bridge thoroughly. Back to her mother's house? Back to poverty? Back to being nobody? She couldn't do it. She had come too far, sacrificed too much. So she stayed, telling herself that this was still better than the alternative, that luxury and security were worth the price she was paying. Besides, when things were good with James, they were very good. He could be charming and generous when he wanted to be. He would surprise her with expensive gifts, take her on luxurious vacations, introduce her to important people. In those moments, she could almost convince herself she had made the right choice. The months turned into years. Sophia became the kind of woman she had once envied, the kind who wore designer clothes and carried expensive handbags, who lunched with other wealthy wives and pretended to care about charity work and book clubs. But the envy she had once felt for such women had transformed into pity, because she now understood what she hadn't before, that many of them were just as trapped as she was, just as unhappy, just wearing better costumes. She heard about Daniel occasionally through mutual acquaintances. He had kept the apartment, was still working at the auto shop. Some people pitied him, the poor man whose wife had left him for a millionaire. But others respected his dignity, the way he had handled the divorce without bitterness or public drama. He had simply kept going, kept working, kept living his life with quiet determination. One acquaintance, someone who had known them both in college, told Sophia that Andrew had started taking business classes at night, trying to learn how to run his own company. Another mentioned that he had been helping out at a youth center, teaching kids basic auto maintenance for free. "He's a good guy," the acquaintance said. "Too bad you didn't see that when you had the chance." The comment stung because it was true. Andrew was a good guy. He had always been a good guy. And she had thrown that away for a man who treated her like property. Sophia told herself she didn't care, that Andrew was part of a past she had outgrown. But sometimes, late at night when James was away on business and the penthouse felt too big and too empty, she would think about their small apartment, about the way Andrew used to hold her hand across the dinner table, about the sound of his laugh, genuine and warm. She would think about the person she used to be and wonder if that Sophia had been happier than the one she was now. She would remember the picnics in the park, the handwritten letters, the way Andrew looked at her like she was the most important person in the world. She would remember feeling valued, not for what she looked like or who she knew, for who she was. James never looked at her that way. To James, she was an attractive accessory, useful for his image, but ultimately interchangeable. The turning point came almost 3 years after she had left Andrew. James's company was going through difficulties, something about bad investments and legal troubles that she didn't fully understand. He became even more volatile, drinking more, exploding at smaller provocations. Money, which had always seemed infinite, suddenly became a source of stress. James started making comments about cutting back, about being more careful, about Sophia needing to understand the pressure he was under. "We might need to sell this place," he said one evening, nursing a scotch. "Move somewhere smaller, more practical." The idea filled her with panic. The condo, the luxury, the lifestyle, that was what she had sacrificed everything for. If that was gone, what had it all been for? "What about my job?" she asked. "What about it?" he said flatly. "I work for your company," she said slowly. "If you're having financial trouble—" "I'm restructuring," he interrupted. "Several positions are being eliminated, including yours." She felt like he had slapped her. "You're firing me?" "I'm eliminating your position," he said, as if that made it better. "It's not personal, it's business." But it was personal. Everything about their relationship was personal, tangled up in his money and his power and his control over her life. Sophia walked on eggshells for the next few weeks, trying to be invisible, trying not to give him any reason to be angry. But his anger didn't need reasons anymore. It just existed, a constant threat that could materialize out of nothing. One evening, after a particularly bad day where some deal had fallen through, he came home drunk and furious. She tried to stay out of his way, retreating to the bedroom, going through her closet as if deciding what to wear tomorrow was the most important thing in the world. But he found her anyway, stumbling into the room with eyes that were glassy and dangerous. He started yelling, accusing her of planning to leave him, of being ungrateful, of using him for his money. When she tried to defend herself, tried to tell him she wasn't planning anything, he grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to leave bruises that would last for weeks. "You think you can do better," he snarled, his breath hot and sour with alcohol. "You think anyone else would want you. You're nothing without me. Nothing. You were nobody when I found you, just some shop girl desperate for a better life. I made you into something. I own you." For the first time, she saw him clearly. Saw past the charm and the wealth to the broken, angry man underneath. And she saw herself, too. Saw what she had become in her pursuit of luxury. She had traded love for money, and found that neither was enough when the person giving them was cruel. She had betrayed everything good in her life for this, for a man who saw her as property, as something he had bought and paid for. The words, "I own you," echoed in her head long after he passed out. She had heard them before, not stated so bluntly, but implied in 1,000 small ways. The way he controlled her clothes, her schedule, her friendships. The way he dismissed her opinions and her feelings. She was owned, purchased, and she had sold herself. That night, after James passed out on the couch, Sophia sat in the dark bedroom and truly understood what she had done. She had destroyed her marriage, hurt a man who had loved her genuinely, thrown away something real for something that glittered but was ultimately worthless. She had won the life she thought she wanted and lost everything that mattered. She packed a bag that night. She didn't take much, just some clothes and the money she had managed to save from the allowance he gave her. She had been squirreling it away for months, some instinct telling her that she might need an escape route someday. She left the jewelry, the designer clothes, the expensive shoes. She left it all behind and walked out of the penthouse with nothing but her freedom and a heart full of regret. She went to a hotel, a cheap one that would have horrified the woman she had been trying to become. The room was small and the sheets were thin, but it was hers, and she had chosen it. For the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. The air didn't smell of expensive cologne and barely controlled rage. It smelled like industrial detergent and the outside world, and it was the sweetest smell she could remember. The divorce was ugly. Richard tried to paint her as a gold digger, as someone who had used him and then abandoned him when things got tough. His lawyers were expensive and aggressive, trying to intimidate her into accepting almost nothing. But she had pictures of her bruises, and she had kept emails where Richard had threatened her. His lawyer knew about his temper, about the accusations that had been made before, about the reputation he was trying to protect. They settled quietly, Richard paying her enough to start over, but not enough to be comfortable. It was less than she deserved, given what she had endured, but it was enough to be free. She signed the papers with a sense of relief so profound it made her dizzy. Whatever happened next, she would face it as herself, not as Richard's possession. She found a small apartment on the edge of the city, in a neighborhood that was neither poor nor wealthy, but somewhere in between. It reminded her of the neighborhood where she and Andrew had lived, and that was both comforting and painful. She got a job at a marketing firm, using the skills she had learned during her time at Richard's company. The job was legitimate, earned on her own merit, and that mattered. She made enough to pay her bills with a little left over. It wasn't luxury, but it was honest, and that mattered more than she had expected. Her life became quiet in a way it hadn't been in years. She went to work, came home, made her own dinner. She bought groceries and cleaned her own apartment and learned to be alone without being lonely. She made a few friends, cautious at first about letting people close, but gradually learning to trust again. She cut her hair short, stopped wearing makeup every day, bought clothes that were comfortable rather than expensive. She became, slowly and painfully, herself again. One evening, she found the compass necklace Andrew had given her at the bottom of her jewelry box. She held it in her hand, feeling the weight of it, remembering his words. "You've always known where you want to go. You've always had direction." She had known where she wanted to go, but she had chosen the wrong path. The compass hadn't failed her. She had failed herself. She put the necklace on and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked different than she had 3 years ago. Older, yes, but also somehow younger. Less polished, but more real. She wore the necklace every day after that, a reminder of who she had been, who she had tried to become, and who she was learning to be. She thought about Andrew often. She wondered if he had moved on, if he had met someone else, if he was happy. She thought about calling him, about apologizing, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. What would she say? "I'm sorry I destroyed everything for money that didn't make me happy? I'm sorry I broke your heart for a man who broke my spirit?" Some apologies were too small for the damage done. The years passed. Sophia was 31 now, and she had built a life that was modest but genuine. She had learned to find contentment in small things, in a good book, in a walk through the park, in a conversation with a friend. She volunteered at a women's shelter on weekends, helping women who were trying to leave abusive relationships, using her own experience to guide them. It was the most meaningful work she had ever done. She had learned that happiness was not something you could buy or find in another person, but something you had to create for yourself, day by day, choice by choice. She had learned that love, real love, was not about what someone could give you, but about who they were, how they treated you, how they made you feel about yourself. She had learned these lessons too late to save her marriage to Andrew, but maybe not too late to save herself. It was a Tuesday afternoon, ironically, when she saw Andrew again. She was walking home from work, taking a shortcut through the old neighborhood where they used to live. She hadn't been back in years, had avoided it deliberately, but today something had made her turn down that familiar street. The auto repair shop where Andrew used to work was gone, replaced by a real estate office with large windows displaying pictures of houses for sale. She stood looking at it, remembering the days when she used to meet him there after his shift, how he would come out smiling despite being tired, despite having spent all day bent over engines, how he would kiss her hello before they walked home together, their hands intertwined. "Sophia?" She turned at the sound of her name, and there he was, standing a few feet away, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. He had changed, she noticed immediately. He was still recognizable, still fundamentally Andrew, but there was a confidence about him now, a polish that hadn't been there before. He wore a well-cut suit, not as expensive as the ones James used to wear, but tailored and professional. His hair was shorter, with touches of gray at the temples that made him look distinguished. He looked successful, she realized with a start. He looked happy. "Andrew?" she said, and her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Hi." They stood there awkwardly for a moment, years of history and hurt between them like a physical barrier. Then he smiled, and it was a genuine smile, without bitterness or anger, and Sophia felt something in her chest crack open. "How are you?" he asked, his voice warm and familiar. "I'm okay," she said. "I'm good, actually. And you?" He nodded. "I'm doing well. I was just in the neighborhood. My company has an office a few blocks from here." "Your company?" He looked almost embarrassed, like he didn't want to boast. "Yeah, I started my own business about 2 years ago. Automotive consulting, helping repair shops modernize and grow, implementing better business practices. It's been doing better than I expected. We have 15 employees now, offices in 3 cities." She felt something twist inside her, a complicated mix of pride and regret, and something that might have been grief. That's wonderful, Andrew. I'm so happy for you. You always wanted your own business. Yeah, he said. It took a while, but I got there. Turns out all those night classes paid off. She remembered hearing about the night classes, how he had been studying business after she left. While she had been living in luxury with James, Andrew had been working 2 jobs and going to school, building a future for himself through sheer determination. Thanks, he continued. I heard you and Ashford split up. I'm sorry if things didn't work out the way you hoped. Don't be, she said quickly. It was the right thing to do. I should have done it sooner. He wasn't, she paused, searching for words. He wasn't a good man. Not like you. Andrew looked uncomfortable at the comparison. We all have our struggles, he said diplomatically. They stood in silence for a moment, and Sophia felt the wake of everything she wanted to say pressing against her chest. I'm sorry, she blurted out, for everything, for how I left, for what I did. You deserved so much better. You were good to me, and I threw it away for something that turned out to be worthless. I was stupid and selfish, and I hurt you terribly. I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I understand now what I lost. I understand what I did. Andrew looked at her for a long moment, and she couldn't read his expression. Then he said, gently, We all make choices, Sophia. You made yours. I hope you found what you were looking for, or at least learned something along the way. I didn't find it, she said, and tears started to well up in her eyes. I was so stupid. I thought I wanted money and excitement, but all I really needed was someone who loved me, and I threw that away. I threw you away. You were the best thing in my life, and I didn't see it until it was too late. He reached out and, very gently, touched her shoulder. A brief, kind gesture that somehow hurt more than indifference would have. You weren't stupid, he said. You were young, and you wanted more than we had. I understood that, even if it hurt. And I hope you found peace now. You deserve that. Everyone does. Have you? She asked, her voice breaking. Found someone, I mean. He smiled again, and this time there was a softness to it that told her everything she needed to know before he said the words. I have, actually. Her name is Sarah. We've been together for about a year. She's a teacher at the elementary school, 3rd grade. She's kind and patient, and she makes me laugh. I think you'd like her. Sophia felt her heart break all over again. But this time it was different. It wasn't the sharp pain of loss, but the dull ache of understanding what could have been. I'm glad, she said, and meant it. You deserve someone kind. You deserve all the happiness in the world. So do you, he said. So do all of us. That's what I learned, Sophia. That happiness isn't about how much money you have or what kind of life you lead. It's about being with people who treat you well, who respect you, who make you want to be better. I hope you find that. I really do. They talked for a few more minutes, carefully, politely, about safe topics. He told her about his business, about the challenges of managing employees, about a particularly difficult client who had become one of his best success stories. She told him about her job, about the women's shelter where she volunteered, about the small but genuine life she had built. Neither of them mentioned the past beyond that first apology. As if by unspoken agreement, they had decided to leave it buried. Finally, Andrew looked at his watch. I should go, he said. I have a meeting with a potential client. Big repair chain. Could be really good for us. But it was good to see you, Sophia. Really, I'm glad you're doing okay. You too, she said, her voice thick with tears she was trying not to shed. He started to walk away, then turned back. Sophia, he said, I want you to know something. I don't hate you. I never did. What happened between us, it taught me a lot about myself, about what I wanted, about what really matters. I learned to value myself, to know my worth, to not settle for someone who didn't see my value. So, in a way, as much as it hurt, I'm grateful for what happened. It made me into the person I needed to be. She couldn't speak, could only nod as tears spilled down her cheeks. He gave her one last small smile, genuine and kind, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of pedestrians with the confidence of a man who knew exactly who he was and where he was going. Sophia stood there on the sidewalk as the world moved around her. People passed by, living their lives, completely unaware of the moment that was happening right there, the quiet devastation and understanding and closure. She thought about the choices she had made, the paths she had taken, the prices she had paid. She thought about the woman she had been, desperate and dissatisfied, willing to throw away something real for something that glittered. She thought about Andrew, the man she had underestimated, who had quietly built a life of meaning and success while she had been chasing illusions. She realized, standing there with tears on her face and people walking past without noticing, that this was the moment that would define her. Not the moment she left Andrew, not the moment she moved in with James, not even the moment she finally left James, but this moment right here, the moment when she had to decide what to do with the understanding she had gained, the hard-won wisdom that had come from her mistakes. She couldn't change the past. She couldn't undo the hurt she had caused or retrieve the love she had thrown away. Andrew had moved on, had found happiness with someone else, someone who probably appreciated him in all the ways Sophia had failed to. And she was genuinely glad for him, even as it broke her heart. He deserved Sarah, deserved kindness, deserved someone who saw his value from the beginning. But she could change what came next. She could choose to be better, to value the right things, to never again confuse wealth with worth or luxury with love. She could take the lessons she had learned and use them to become someone better, someone who wouldn't make the same mistakes again. The sky was turning gray, threatening rain, just like it had that day she first met James. The parallel wasn't lost on her. She pulled her coat tighter around herself and started walking. She didn't know where she was going exactly, just knew she needed to keep moving forward. Because that was all anyone could do, really. Keep moving forward, carrying the lessons of the past, but not letting them trap you there. She walked for an hour, through neighborhoods she used to know, and some she had never seen before. She walked past the boutique where she used to work, now under new management with new displays in the windows. She walked past the expensive restaurant where James had first taken her, where the prices had seemed like a promise of a better life. She walked past everything that had once seemed so important and realized none of it mattered. Not the addresses, not the price tags, not the external markers of success. What mattered was who you were when no one was watching. What mattered was how you treated people, especially the people who loved you. What mattered was integrity, kindness, honesty. These were the things Andrew had always had, the things she had undervalued, the things that had actually made him rich in all the ways that mattered. The rain started to fall, light at first and then harder. Sophia didn't run for shelter. She just walked, letting the rain soak through her coat, feeling it cold on her skin. It felt cleansing somehow, like a baptism, like a new beginning. She thought about the version of herself who had stood in that small apartment years ago, looking at James's business card and seeing a way out. If she could go back, what would she tell that young woman? She would tell her that the way out she was looking for wasn't through someone else's money or status. The way out was through becoming the person she was meant to be, through developing her own skills and confidence, through learning to value herself, not for what she could acquire, but for who she was. She would tell her that love, real love, was the most valuable thing in the world, and that throwing it away for anything less was a mistake she would spend years regretting. She would tell her that happiness is not a destination you arrive at by making the right choices or acquiring the right things. It is a practice, a daily commitment to being honest with yourself and others, to treating people with kindness, to understanding that everything you do has consequences, and that sometimes those consequences are irreversible. But mostly, she would tell her to appreciate Andrew, to see him clearly, to understand what she had in him, to recognize that a man who comes home tired but smiling, who remembers your favorite foods, who holds your hand across a dinner table and means it when he says he loves you, that man is worth more than all the money in the world. She would tell her not to take that for granted, not to throw it away, because once it's gone, you can't get it back. But she couldn't go back. She could only go forward, carrying her regrets but not letting them define her. She could only try to be better, to make different choices, to honor the lessons she had learned by living them every day. That evening, in her small apartment, Sophia made dinner for herself. Nothing fancy, just pasta and a salad, but she set the table nicely, used a cloth napkin, poured herself a glass of wine. She ate slowly, tasting her food, appreciating the simple fact that she was here, alive, free to make her own choices. She was no longer in the penthouse prison or the cramped apartment of desperation. She was in a place she had chosen, living a life she was building honestly, one day at a time. After dinner, she sat by the window and watched the rain. She thought about Andrew and his kind smile, about the way he had told her he didn't hate her, that he was grateful for what their relationship had taught him. She thought about the grace in that, the generosity of spirit it took to forgive someone who had hurt you so deeply. She wondered if she would ever be capable of that kind of grace, that kind of forgiveness. She hoped so. She pulled out her phone and started to write a message. "Dear Andrew," it began. But after a few words, she stopped. What was there to say that she hadn't already said? He had moved on, found happiness, built a life. Reaching out to him now wouldn't be for his benefit. It would be for hers, a way to ease her own guilt, and he didn't owe her that absolution. He had already given her more than she deserved by treating her with kindness when they met, by not letting her see any bitterness or anger, by wishing her well. Instead, she deleted the message and opened a new note. She started to write, not to Andrew, but to herself. A letter to the woman she had been, acknowledging her mistakes, but also her pain, her fears, her very human desire for something more. A letter to the woman she was now, affirming her commitment to do better, to be better, to use her experiences to help others avoid the same mistakes. A letter to the woman she hoped to become, someone who had taken the broken pieces of her past and built something meaningful from them. She wrote until her hands were tired and the rain had stopped, and she felt lighter somehow, like putting the words down had released some of the weight she had been carrying. Then she saved the letter, turned off her phone, and went to bed. She dreamed that night of the small apartment where she and Andrew had lived, but in the dream it wasn't cramped or shabby. It was filled with light, and she was happy there, truly happy, in a way she had never been when she actually lived there. When she woke up, she understood what the dream was telling her, that happiness had been there all along, available to her if only she had known how to see it, if only she had valued what she had instead of always reaching for more. The weeks that followed were quiet but purposeful. Sophia went to work, came home, lived her life with intention. But something fundamental had shifted inside her. She found herself being kinder to people, more patient, more present.
She stopped comparing her life to others, stopped measuring her worth by external standards. She volunteered more at the women's shelter, helping women who were trying to leave abusive relationships, using her own experience to guide them toward freedom and healing. She reconnected with old friends she had abandoned during her time with James, apologizing for her absence and slowly rebuilding those bridges. Some of them forgave her easily, others were more cautious, but she understood and accepted their caution. Trust, once broken, took time to rebuild, and she was willing to put in that time. One afternoon, one of her coworkers invited her to a party. Sophia's first instinct was to say no, to protect herself from potential discomfort or judgment, to stay in the safe cocoon she had built around herself. But then she remembered Andrew's smile, his grace, his ability to move forward without bitterness. If he could forgive her and wish her well, the least she could do was live fully, to not hide from life out of shame or fear. She said yes. The party was casual, nothing like the elegant affairs she had attended with James. Just people in jeans and casual clothes, eating pizza and drinking beer, laughing too loud at jokes that weren't particularly funny, but were genuine and warm. There was a man there, a friend of a friend, who introduced himself as Marcus.
He was an accountant, he told her, with a self-deprecating laugh, which was probably the most boring profession in the world. But he had kind eyes and an easy smile, and when he talked to her, he really listened, not just waiting for his turn to speak. They talked for an hour, standing in the corner of the crowded living room, about nothing particularly important. Books they had read, movies they wanted to see, their shared and inexplicable love for terrible reality TV shows. He told her about his family, about his nephews who he adored, about his parents who had been married for 40 years and still held hands. She found herself relaxing, laughing, being herself in a way she hadn't been with anyone in a long time. He didn't ask about her past, didn't seem interested in impressing her or being impressed. He was just present, just himself, and that was refreshing in a way Sophia hadn't expected. There was no performance, no attempt to prove anything, just two people talking, connecting, finding common ground. When the party ended, he asked if he could call her sometime, maybe take her to dinner. Sophia hesitated. She wasn't sure she was ready, wasn't sure she deserved another chance at happiness, wasn't sure she wouldn't mess it up again. But then she thought about the letter she had written to herself, about the woman she was trying to become, about the fact that growth meant taking risks, even when you were scared. That woman didn't hide from possibility. She faced it, honestly and bravely, even when it scared her. "I'd like that," she said, and meant it. Their first date was at a small Italian restaurant, the kind of place where the food was good, but the atmosphere was unpretentious, where the tablecloths were checkered red and white, and the waiters knew most of the customers by name. Marcus was nervous, she could tell, fidgeting with his napkin and talking a little too fast, and she found it endearing. It reminded her that relationships should be between equals, two imperfect people trying their best, not a transaction where one person held all the power. They talked easily, and she found herself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in longer than she could remember. He told her about a disastrous camping trip with his college friends, about the time he accidentally sent a personal email to everyone in his company, about his ongoing battle with the squirrels who kept raiding his bird feeder. His stories were small and human and real, and she loved that about him. Over dessert, Marcus became serious for a moment. "I should tell you," he said. "I don't have a lot of money. I mean, I do okay, but I'm still paying off student loans, still trying to build my career. I don't have a fancy apartment or a sports car or anything like that. I hope that's okay. I just wanted to be upfront about it." Sophia reached across the table and took his hand, feeling the simple warmth of human connection, of honesty, of someone who valued her enough to be vulnerable with her. "It's more than okay," she said. "It's perfect. I don't care about any of that. I really don't. I learned the hard way that those things don't matter." He smiled, relieved, and squeezed her hand. "Good," he said, "because I really like you. I'd like to see where this goes, if you're interested." "I'm interested," she said, and she was. Not because Marcus represented escape or advancement or anything other than what he was, a good person who treated her well, who made her laugh, who saw her as an equal. That was enough. That was everything. They started dating, taking things slow, building something genuine brick by brick. Sophia told him about her past, about Andrew and James, about the mistakes she had made and the lessons she had learned. She expected judgment, maybe even rejection, but Marcus just listened. When she was done, he said, "We've all done things we regret. What matters is who we are now and who we're trying to become. I like who you are now. I like who you're trying to become." As the months passed, Sophia felt something she hadn't felt in years. Contentment. Not the frantic happiness she had chased with James, not the desperate hope she had clung to with Andrew in the beginning, when she was still trying to convince herself it was enough. This was something steadier, deeper, more sustainable. A quiet joy that came from living honestly, from being with someone who saw her clearly, flaws and all, and chose her anyway. She thought about Andrew often, wondering if he was happy with Sarah, hoping he was. She imagined him teaching Sarah to dance in their living room, or bringing her wildflowers, or holding her hand across a dinner table. She hoped Sarah appreciated him, treasured him, saw him for the extraordinary, ordinary man he was. She hoped Sarah never took him for granted, never threw away what Andrew offered for something shinier and emptier. She didn't regret their encounter that rainy afternoon. It had given her closure, or as close to closure as she was likely to get. She had faced him, apologized, and been met with grace that she hadn't earned but was grateful for anyway. She couldn't ask for more than that. She couldn't expect more than that. All she could do was live in a way that honored the lesson he had taught her about dignity and grace and the quiet strength of goodness. One Saturday morning, she was reading the paper when she came across an article in the business section. "Local entrepreneur's company expands nationally," the headline read. The article was about Andrew, about how his automotive consulting business had grown from a small local operation to a nationally recognized firm with offices in 12 cities. There was a picture of him cutting a ribbon at a new office opening, Sarah by his side, both of them smiling. The article mentioned that Andrew was known not just for his business acumen, but for his integrity, for the way he treated employees and clients with respect, for his charitable work with at-risk youth. Sophia felt no jealousy, no regret, only a genuine happiness for him mixed with a bittersweet pride. He had done it. He had built the life he deserved, not despite what had happened between them, but perhaps because of it. He had taken his pain and used it as fuel, had proved that success was possible with hard work and integrity. He had shown that the good guys could finish first, that kindness was not weakness, that treating people well was not naive, but was actually the strongest foundation for lasting success. She clipped the article and put it in a drawer, not as a reminder of what she had lost, but as a reminder of what was possible. If Andrew could rebuild, could find success and love and happiness after such heartbreak, then so could she. She had started the journey, was still walking the path, and maybe, just maybe, she would get there too. That evening, Marcus came over for dinner.
They cooked together, moving around her small kitchen in comfortable synchronization that came from months of learning each other's rhythms. They made pasta from scratch, laughing when the dough stuck to the counter, working together to solve the small problems that came up. They ate at her little table, and she felt a pang of memory, but also gratitude.
That part of her life had shaped her, taught her, made her who she was now. Marcus noticed her quietness. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle, not demanding, but offering space for whatever she needed to say. She looked at him, at his kind face and patient eyes, and nodded. "Yeah," she said, "I'm good. Better than I've been in a long time. I saw an article about Andrew today. He's doing really well. His business is expanding nationally." "That must have been something to see," Marcus said carefully. "Actually," she said, surprising herself with the truth of it, "it wasn't hard. I'm happy for him. He deserves all of it. I just hope I can build something equally meaningful with my own life. Not the same thing, but something that matters, something that's built on the right foundation." "You already are," Marcus said simply. "The work you do at the shelter matters. The way you treat people matters. You matter. Not because of what you achieve or accomplish, but because of who you are." She felt tears prick her eyes, good tears this time, healing tears. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing me, for being patient with me, for giving me a chance, even though I came with baggage." "We all have baggage," he said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "The question is whether we're willing to unpack it or just keep carrying it around. You're unpacking yours. That takes courage." The rain started again, a soft patter against the windows. Marcus squeezed her hand. "I love you," he said quietly. And it wasn't the first time he had said it, but somehow it felt different this time, more solid, more real. Sophia felt a swell of emotion that was complicated and messy and absolutely genuine. "I love you too," she said, and she meant it. Not the desperate, grasping love she had felt for James, not even the comfortable, taken-for-granted love she had had with Andrew before she destroyed it. This was something else, something built on honesty and mutual respect, and the understanding that love was not about possession or transaction, but about partnership and growth. And in that moment, in that small apartment, with a man who loved her not for what she could offer him, but for who she was, Sophia finally found what she had been looking for all along. Not luxury, not excitement, not the envy of others, but peace. The simple, profound peace of being exactly where she was supposed to be, with someone who saw her clearly, flaws and scars and all, and loved her anyway. She had lost so much in her pursuit of more. She had hurt people, especially Andrew, who had never deserved her cruelty or betrayal. She had wasted years chasing an illusion, had sold her integrity for a life that turned out to be a prison. The cost had been high, almost unbearably so. But she had survived it. She had learned. She had grown. And now, finally, she was becoming the person she should have been all along. The story of the woman who rejected her poor boyfriend only to have him become her boss would be told and retold, a cautionary tale about valuing the wrong things. People would judge her, and they would be right to. She had made terrible choices, had hurt someone who loved her, had valued money over love and paid the price for it. But the story didn't end with regret or his success. It ended with both of them finding happiness, in different ways, with different people. It ended with forgiveness, growth, and the understanding that sometimes the longest journey is the one back to yourself. Sophia stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rain-washed street.
Somewhere out there, Andrew was living his life, successful and happy with Sarah, building a legacy that was about more than just money. She was happy for him, genuinely happy, and she hoped he was at peace. She hoped he had forgiven her, if not for her sake, then for his own, because holding on to anger only poisons the person carrying it. She hoped Sarah knew how lucky she was, how rare a man like Andrew was. She turned back to Marcus, who was watching her with patient understanding. He didn't know all her thoughts, couldn't understand all the complex emotions she was feeling, but he knew enough. He knew she was dealing with her past, making peace with her mistakes, and he loved her through it, without trying to fix it, or minimize it, or rush her through it. "Come back," he said softly. "You're getting lost in your head again." She smiled and returned to the table, to the present moment, to the life she was building one honest choice at a time. The past was behind her, unchangeable but not unsurmountable. The future was ahead, uncertain but full of possibility. And the present, this moment right here with this good man who loved her, was all she really had. So she chose to be present. She chose to be grateful.
She chose to love and be loved, honestly and without reservation. She chose to be the kind of person who learned from her mistakes rather than being defined by them. And in making those choices, day after day, moment after moment, she found something that all the money in the world could never buy: redemption. Not given by anyone else, but earned through her own hard work, her own commitment to being better, her own daily decision to value what mattered. The rain continued to fall, washing the city clean, and Sophia sat with the man who loved her, in her modest apartment, living her modest life, and felt richer than she had ever felt in any penthouse, because this was real. This was earned. This was built not on illusions or manipulations, but on honesty and effort and genuine connection. And that, she understood now, was worth everything.